What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Untold Stories Athlete Edition. For episode 10, it's going to be a little different. I'm really excited. I actually am not going to have a student athlete on, but she is actually a master's student at Baylor University writing about body image, and I can't wait to have her on. So for the 10th episode, we're going to have Jaden Jennings. Jaden is currently a graduate student at Baylor University pursuing a degree in journalism, public relations, and new media. She just completed her master's thesis titled Scrolling Your Way to a Warped Sense of Self, Body Image, Social Media, and College-Age Females, where she found some interesting insights into females involved in college athletics. Jaden graduated with her bachelor's degree in communication studies from Oklahoma Baptist University and is currently interning at NASA Johnson Space Center in public affairs and external relations. Welcome, Jaden.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know, I'm super excited. So I actually got the chance to read Jaden's thesis a little bit, and I think the main question that kept on stirring in my head is, what made you want to write about this topic?
Yeah, so I was a dancer in undergrad, and although it was a great experience, I felt like there was a lot of toxicity on the team, as far as girls not eating or kind of celebrating being skinny. It was just a very much learning experience for me of, okay, why am I being subject to the culture of eating poorly or looking at my body in a negative way? So for me, that's kind of what spurred on the idea of, hey, as a master's student, let's look into this a little further.
Yeah, and I think after reading the thesis, you go through different theories. So the one that caught my eye was a social identity theory. So what was some of that findings that you found in your thesis that have to do with college athletics?
Yeah, so I also studied the media as well on social media, and honestly, there's a lot of overlap. So when you're talking about social identity theory, I particularly chose that theory because a lot of identity is kind of rooted in what you're doing. So for athletics, for example, a lot of, you're together, you're playing as a team, you kind of wrap your identity in being an athlete.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, even on social media as well, it's honestly sometimes like a game. It's who can be positive, but yet have the most likes, or, just make a good example, but yet it's also kind of negative at the same time. Not always. But that's really what drove me to look into social identity theory. Was this really speaks a lot to how we not only function in athletics, but as we function in groups in general.
Yeah.
And root our identity in certain groups.
Yeah, so with body image, I feel like I always just think of, especially with women, how they look at other women, but how you were talking about through social media, likes. Mm-hmm. I never really would think about that with body image. So how do you think people getting more likes than other people can affect them?
Yeah, it's definitely been researched that approval is coming in the form of likes. One of the major findings of my research was just the approval or disapproval. So there's a thing called upward comparison and downward comparison. So in my research, there was more different types of comparison as far as, okay, women will compare, but there's different types, right? And so a lot of times they'd compare to people who they thought were better than themselves, always striving to be better. And they're like, well, if this person has more likes, then obviously they're doing something different or better. And even it can start off in just kind of a naive, not even meaning for it to be negative, but it can kind of spur on this comparison game, right? Of, okay, I've always got to be striving to be better. And obviously, if you have more likes, then you're just naturally better. You're more approved by society. And so that's kind of the generational thing I learned when I was kind of looking at it. One of the studies from TikTok talks about everyone wants to be famous. And so the underlying struggle or underlying gratitude, or not gratitude, but gratification from women was, I want to be famous, I want to be known. And I think that can go into athletics as well. Not even just on social media, but just how you do in your sport.
Yeah, I find that super interesting. Yeah. So I think it was maybe a couple months ago, name, image, and likeness is now, you can make money off of it as a student athlete. So when I first saw that, I honestly thought about body image because I'm wow, women athletes could be selling themselves for money and different brands. And I honestly started comparing myself to like, why am I not having companies come reaching out to me? So can you talk a little bit about how name, image, and likeness can affect student athletes or even college females as well?
Oh yeah, because then it kind of dabbles into influencer, right? You are considered an influencer at that point. If companies are reaching out to you, you kind of have that authority of being a quote unquote influencer. And obviously my research isn't about it, but I can speak to it just being an athlete myself in the past. And it's so easy, like you said, to compare to people of like, okay, why is their page doing well? Why were they chosen compared to me? And every woman I interviewed in my study said they compare themselves to other women, period. And I just think, at what point is social media helpful? It's almost like, okay, who can be better than who? And although there's not anything necessarily wrong, with being paid to be on social media, I just think it causes some gray area.
Yeah.
As far as, what is considered good and what is considered right. And I don't know, what do you think about being paid the name, image, and likeness? What do you think?
So at first, I don't know. I agreed with it because I think it's great for student athletes to show their brand to other people, because there were so many strict things that we had to, we couldn't do. Mm-hmm. So especially for me, I'm not one of the top athletes, so I do like to communicate with other people. I would love to promote brands that I really liked, but I felt like I wouldn't be known because I wasn't super known in my sport. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it was just me kind of pushing towards other companies, and then I would see other teammates that would have even bigger companies, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And I didn't necessarily compare my body, but it was more of just kind of dwindling my confidence.
Right.
Because I'm I'm reaching out to people. I'm doing everything. Do I need to have more followers on TikTok? Do I need to have more followers on Instagram? What am I doing wrong? So like I said, the name, image, and likeness thing is great, but there is, of course, going to be negative things that come from it.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And even, if that becomes a problem with going back to body image, you can start to compare, is it because of the way I look? And for some women, that's a deep-rooted issue. And I think in American culture, it is. Just American culture has made us think, oh, we have to look a certain way. And they say, oh, yeah, promote body positivity. But even in my research, body positivity is a thing, but why are so many women still struggling with wanting to be thin?
Yeah.
So I think that is just a problem that I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to, but that's one of my goals, is to figure out why it's a problem.
And you talk about gratification as well. Mm-hmm. And I think how I have been throughout my life is I like gratification from other females. It's weird. If a woman compliments me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, mm-hmm. wow, I'm amazing. When a male, it's just different. And it's crazy to me because we compare ourselves to females. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Of course, most of the time we're not going to compare ourselves to males, but then I want gratification from females as well. Mm-hmm. It's just weird. Do you ever go through the same thing as well?
Oh, definitely. Sometimes I've wondered, do we just post on social media to get gratification from other females? You know what I mean? Oftentimes I'm like, I don't care what that guy posts. I'm like, what is she going to say? How is she going to respond? And I don't know why that is. I really don't. But you bringing light to that, that's so true. I think that females want gratification from other females.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely have just seen that throughout my life, and also just speaking to other friends as well. So kind of turning the page a little bit. So you had a major findings section and you were talking about COVID-19. Mm-hmm. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah. So I just finished data collection a little bit ago, and one of the major finds that I was not expecting was how bad COVID-19 affected body image. Obviously, my study's qualitative, not quantitative, so this applied to the people I interviewed. But there was a common theme of TikTok, and the problem was, I realized, is when you're on social media, you have nothing else to do. That's all anyone had to do. And so body image concerns actually got worse with COVID than beforehand. People were looking at each other, and primarily the issue was what I eat in a day videos. It was so bad. And I was not expecting people to answer that. It didn't even cross my mind. I had one participant, I kid you not, Bree, she would, instead of eating, she would just watch the videos and be like, well, this is what it's got to be. This is not enough food. Like, you know, I just need to watch this instead of eating. Like, I'm not like these women. And it goes back to comparison. The root of it is we could see what everyone was doing, and we didn't really have anything else to do.
Yeah.
You know, we were stuck at home. And so it definitely made body image worse. And I don't know, fast forward to 2022, and we're still struggling with people comparing what I eat in a day videos. Here's my workout. And, you know, they can be positive in a way, but I think it's just a matter of, you know, you can, whatever you like on TikTok, that's what you're going to keep seeing. And if you're liking toxic stuff, you know, it's a gratification. Some people want to see toxic stuff. They're addicted to it because that's what they're comparing to, upward comparison, people they view as better than themselves. So that was an interesting, unexpected find from my research, was COVID affecting body image.
Yeah, I think for me when COVID hit, like with athletics and things like that, it's like, I was like, am I just going to sit around the house all day and not work out? And honestly, I did find ways to work out, but I was always stressed when I was working out. I was always like, am I burning enough calories? Am I eating too much? You know what I mean? Because right after I'm going to work out, I'm just going to sit at my house all day. Yeah. And that's so true. I never really thought about how much like that I would watch TikTok. And the bad thing is I always like a lot of food stuff. So my algorithm is going to be a lot of food. And whenever I'm struggling a lot with what my diet looks like, oh my gosh, my just whole feed is just food. And I've learned that I'm just going to eat. I'm never going to like tell myself no. If I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. But I think at the beginning of COVID, it was just really hard for me to find ways to stay in shape. And then I would see other women on like YouTube and doing these videos, and I'm like, how are they doing this? Like, how are they working out inside of their homes? And people were in apartments too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I had a good enough space to do stuff, but then I thought about other people and I'm like, man, they could be in such a small area and they might not be able to do stuff. So I can definitely see how those like major findings could affect women and how like TikTok and Instagram and things like that. So I just find that super interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
So I was thinking about this while you were speaking. Do you ever think body image with athletics is different in like certain sports? So softball versus track, the sport that I'm in.
Yeah. I do think so, because like I said, being in dance, I noticed just based on my participant responses that aesthetic-based sports had more body image issues than, let's say, you know, soccer or softball. A lot more, like we're talking, I don't want to name drop any, but just take dance for an example or something like that. You know, more tight outfits, something that's just more body driven. You don't have a choice. Those sports seem to have more underlying body image issues than just non-aesthetic based sports, I would say.
So what's an aesthetic based sport?
Yeah. So aesthetic based sport is going to be, like I said, anything that's more image driven. So you think of like the basics in your head. You've got cheer, dance, gymnastics, acrobatics, swimming, more just, like I said, tighter uniform than maybe a looser, more like you can kind of eat whatever you want and like devour your other teammates. Like it's more about you have to like weigh a certain amount to be tossed in the air, or you have to, you know, fit into the uniform or you'll get cut out. You know, it's just more aesthetic based sports like that. And that doesn't necessarily limit body image to aesthetic based sports, because some of the people I interviewed were not, and they had issues as well of not being able to gain enough weight, you know, and so it's just an ongoing process. And I think, you know, back to the coach thing, coach comments have a lot to do with it. I don't think coaches realize how much of an impact that they have, especially male coaches, like commenting on women's bodies, and just some other things that maybe we'll get into about that affect body image, specifically in athletics, that I noticed.
Yeah, and we can definitely go into that. So when do you think a coach should be allowed to comment on the way someone's body image is? Or if you don't think so at all.
I suggested in my research to have training programs for coaches talking about body image because of the society we live in. Because if body image wasn't bad, then why do 90% of college-age females hate the way they look? You know what I mean?
Wow.
So that's just such a high number. And I feel like coaches now should be trained as far as, okay, how do I respond to a female athlete that's struggling with body image or an eating disorder? Like, how am I supposed to respond to that? And so at this moment, I don't exactly know, other than I'm trying to find solutions as far as how do we approach and educate people on how to respond. Because, you know, I don't know, several people, since the majority of the people I interviewed were athletes, a lot of eating disorder stuff going on. And that's really sad to me. And I just think it needs to be addressed. And I think coaches, you know, even coaches, just teammates in general, need to be more open about it. I think it's such a taboo topic. I know.
100%.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, so.
So, like, for example, let's say my best friend, this is not my best friend. My best friend, Rebecca, I noticed that something is just off, and I'm like sensing maybe it's an eating disorder. How do you think someone should approach someone, especially if you have a really close relationship to them?
Yeah, I think it's a give and take, right? Because the initial reaction is to be like, what the heck are you doing? And to be really stern. But I just don't think necessarily, like, for eating disorders that is beneficial. Obviously, like, I'm not a counselor, but I do think that there's just like certain ways we can learn to approach it of, you know, how can I help you? Is there anything going on? More just like a tactical approach of like, I'm here for you if anything's going on. Instead of accusing them of being like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You know, why are you eating? Just like framing your words a little differently, which is something I think is super beneficial even for me. Like, cause I want to know, okay, now that I have these findings that I found, how can I approach this situation better in my everyday life? And I think, you know, counseling is like a taboo topic, but that's actually one of my solutions in here is cognitive behavioral therapy. Because of the age that we live in, I mean, it's a silent struggle. I feel like social media has different detrimental effects, not even just with body image. It's a great tool. Like, it's such a great tool, and it's not going anywhere. Yeah. So how do we navigate when we can see what everyone else is doing? And body image is one of those categories to navigate through. Yeah. So
I think therapy is definitely something, or counseling, that people do feel taboo towards talking to, but I think it definitely is becoming more normal. I think at least in our society, like even listening to different podcasts, there's podcast hosts that go to therapy regularly. Like I have people in my life as well. So I think that is like such a great solution to do. And it's like, it's okay to talk about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And going into like my example, let's say I go up to Rebecca and her reaction is just bad. And she's just very defensive, and she denies it. What do you think I should do in that situation?
I think maybe what I would do, or what research maybe suggests, is if you feel like she isn't responding to you, and let's say she's on your sports team or something, notify an authority or someone about what's going on. Authority, I mean coach. Just like kind of let them know like the situation and see what they think that you should do and how you should respond. And obviously I said another tool is research. National Eating Disorder Association has recently put out a lot of tools as far as, my friend is struggling with eating disorders. How do I respond to her? And that's just something to even myself with this new information want to be cognizant of moving forward. Because honestly, as far as just approaching a higher authority and being loving in your language and taking a step back instead of accusing, I don't really know the exact answer to that, which is sad, but this research has inspired me to dig for it more, which I wouldn't have before this topic.
Yeah.
So
do you think after you've done so much research for your thesis, do you have a different view, like in everyday life? Like even when you go through your phone, when you see other women, does your perspective change?
Oh yeah, definitely. I pay very close attention to media messaging. I have my likes turned off on social media. I used to compare that. I mean, that's part of like the reason I looked into it. I have them turned off, and that isn't like a solution for everyone. It just helps for me.
Yeah.
Not comparing like, oh my goodness, like this dancer is getting more, more traction than me, you know? What is she doing differently? But yeah, I forgot what the question was.
Oh, just talking about like how your perspective has changed, like whenever going through everyday life.
And even positive influencers. I'm like, why are people still struggling if people are being positive about it?
Yeah.
And I think the issue is there's also a thing called toxic positivity. And so I try to watch out for that as well. Toxic positivity meaning there's a picture side by side of, okay, girls, like I look like this as well. But sometimes, even though it's meant to be good, girls know they look good on both ends of the picture. And it's a lot of like, okay, well, what if I look like the second picture all the time?
Yeah.
You know, and so women, that's come into question with me even a little bit in this research is, you know, I feel like a cop-out, like I look like the second picture all the time. There's no before and after.
Yeah.
You know.
I never would think about that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes before and after pictures are just kind of like, am I ever going to get to that after? I never would think about that.
Always striving to be like, well, I want to look like this before picture because she can look like that in that before picture. And, you know, there's obviously good intention with a lot of it. I think a lot of people are getting better, and there's several positive influencers after this study I've made sure to follow. I think are really great that are like beating the norms. But American culture is still defined by heterosexual norms, meaning that, you know, when I asked my participants to describe their perfect female, they said tall, toned, blonde, skinny. You know, that every time. And clear skin, which I thought was really interesting. 15 of the 17 said that.
Wow.
Yeah, clear skin was a sign of perfection to them. So
they all said the tall, blonde, toned, skinny.
Oh yeah, except for a few. Yeah, that was their answer. They said tall, toned, but a little bit of butt, a little bit of boobs, like, but also toned and skinny.
It's like just trying. Wow.
It's like a paradox almost, and that's kind of what society has molded.
Yeah.
And I thought the clear skin thing was interesting because I never would have thought of clear skin as a sign of perfection, but they said, yep, every time, wipe my teeth, clear my skin before I post anything, every single time.
Yeah.
So that was another interesting find as well.
Yeah. I'm going to go back a little bit because the aesthetic sport thing just keeps on running through my head. So for me, I used to be a volleyball player as well, and I'm a track runner too. And I just keep on like going back and forth to how I've compared my body throughout doing those two sports. And volleyball players are usually like, they have really big legs.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're long arms, like tall and things like that. When you look at a track body, yes, there's a lot of different events, but most of those women are like very cut.
Yeah.
Like just very defined legs. And I know in volleyball you're wearing spandex, but you're also wearing like a longer sleeve shirt, and like track you're wearing like a tank top. Sometimes most teams wear like bikini bottoms and things like that. And I never really realized like how much I've compared my body so much more in track than I ever did in volleyball. Cause like in volleyball I was like, man, I feel like I'm really skinny in this sport, honestly. And then when I would go to track, I'd be like, how does, especially girls in my event. So I do 400 meter hurdles. So I would look at Sydney McLaughlin, Dalia Mohammed, like all these amazing athletes. And I'm like, how can I get to that? Like, why am I not like that?
Yeah.
And it was just like, my body's different. Like my body goes through different things. And like some track meets I would go to, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to look like this girl. And it would just diminish me. And I bet a ton of student athletes, women student athletes just go through that. And it just, it honestly just blows my mind. And
because the line can be blurry in athletics, I think, with eating and body image in general, because several participants were like, yeah, like I'm training. I said, but they're like, but at what point are you doing it to look better? You know, to look better, to fit the mold of your sport.
Yeah.
And I think that was like an underlying issue of like, there's a lot of hidden research about just athletics and eating problems. And you know, it's a strive of perfection. You want to be the best at your sport. And, you know, eating a lot of times, like you have to fuel your body. And so what are you fueling it for?
Yeah.
You know, I think that was something too is, man, yeah, the line is blurry in athletics. Like, are you overworking out? You know, what is the happy medium there?
Yeah.
So
I think like what you said about why are women working out? And I've always like thought about what am I going to do after I'm done being a student athlete? And I've always had two decisions. I've always like, I want to do like marathons, like triathlons, or I really want to get into weightlifting. And then I kind of just thought like, why do I want to, because those are two very different things, very different body types. So I was like, I kind of want to do triathlons because I'll be like super skinny. Honestly, I was like, I want to be like that skinny looking Brie. But then when I look at weightlifting, I was like, if I weightlift, I'm going to want to do it because I want to be strong, not just physically, but mentally as well. And that's kind of like what you were saying. I think it's super important that women know, like, are they working out to make them feel better, like mentally? I feel like a lot of women do that, but I feel like a lot of them do it just to look better physically. And sometimes that's not going to be healthy for some people. So I'm super glad that you talked about that as well.
Yeah. And a lot of women, I realized at the end that the women that were more confident had more self-awareness than those that did not. They had enough awareness to be like, okay, what I'm viewing on social media is fake. I do have worth. And they had different ways of combating that. But just self-awareness, I think just positive mindset was a big component for women who viewed their body as more positive than others.
Yeah.
And so I do think, as cliche as it is I'm realizing that talking positively to yourself, talking to yourself as a friend, it takes discipline, but that seems to like help most of these women, as far as the ones that were more confident with how they looked versus ones who weren't.
Yeah. I think positive self-talk is super important. And some people might think it's weird, but sometimes just looking in the mirror and giving yourself like words of affirmation is super important. So for my last question, what was the most like shocking information that you found while doing your research?
Oh, definitely the COVID.
Yeah.
The COVID issue. And, you know, this research isn't generalizable, but I do believe it's transferable because this is a qualitative research study. And these type of research studies are important because it gives you a deep, authentic view into someone's life, whereas quantitative is just numbers. So I was really able to connect with girls. Some girls in the interviews cried. Like, I mean, they just were holding this in, and it was just very moving. But yes, I think COVID affecting body image more than I thought. I said, you know, wow, like it affected me as well. And I didn't even realize it until a year later doing this research. I mean, 2 years now.
Yeah, like coming into this interview, like I didn't really think of anything that I've been through, but just hearing like certain topics that you talked about, I was like, wow, like I've gone through those as well. So thank you for coming and shedding light on something that is honestly like pretty taboo. And hopefully you can inspire more women to want to talk about it. And I definitely think that this was such a good topic to talk about, and I'm glad that we were able to do it on the podcast.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, guys. So for this episode, you can watch it on YouTube at the Untold Stories Athlete Edition or on Spotify with the same title. Thank you.